Hey everyone! Today we're finishing the final details on the building part, before moving on to painting these two terrain tiles. The goal is to create an atmospheric game board that's both fun to play on, and truly captures the ruined, haunted feel of the City of the Damned. So, let's get started. I've already glued down the tile topper on the left, but I can't attach the topper on this tile just yet. Once it's in place, this underground room will be inaccessible for painting. To be perfectly honest, extending the underground area doesn't really add anything to the gameplay. It's simply there to create the illusion that the sewers continue beyond the board. It just felt right. It makes the whole scene feel more believable. In the previous episode we tested whether magnets would be needed to hold the grates in place. Well, you can judge for yourself, but in the end I decided to skip the magnets. As you can see, the grates stay firmly in place thanks to a snug fit and good old gravity. We'll be adding a few resin-printed figures to the underground area to give it a bit more character and help bring the scene to life. So, we'll be adding a few sewer rats and a giant spider. One of the tiles has a separate sewer tunnel with a manhole cover, and that's where the giant spider will be lurking. It's not because it serves any gameplay purpose, but simply because it fits the atmosphere. Here's my current printing setup. On the left is the wash and cure station. In the middle is my resin printer for all the detailed pieces. And on the right is the FDM printer, which handles most of the terrain. The FDM printer has been running pretty much 24/7 throughout this project. Now let's get some paint on these miniatures. I'm definitely not the best miniature painter, and this isn't meant to be a painting tutorial. Instead, I want to share the journey with you. Every step of building this Mordheim board is part of the project, and that includes painting these little details that will help bring it to life. I printed 4 different rat designs in 3 different sizes, for a total of 12 rats. I'll paint them all, but I probably won't use every one. We'll see how many it takes to make the sewers feel properly infested. I'm starting with a medium gray base dry brush, followed by an ivory white dry brush. This will create a good foundation for the contrast paints. Now I'm slapping on some contrast paint. Honestly, any brown will do for this step. I tried finishing the rat's tails with Reikland Flesh Aid, but it didn't make much of a difference. A quick dry brush with Vallejo Brown Rose gave them the finish I was after. As for the spider, you'll have to wait until we glue it into the sewers. I actually repainted it so many times that I eventually gave up and printed a new one to start over. My painting skills don't always match my imagination, so in the end, I went back to dry brushing. Sometimes the simpler approach works best. I'm using some trusty old wall plaster to fill the edges, making sure everything is finished before priming the tile toppers. I'm working the plaster deep into the cavity, so it grips the inside as it dries. Now we're ready for primer. I filled the seams between the tile toppers with plastic putty and dark earth texture paste. After the first coat, a few gaps were still visible, so I touched them up one last time. Now we can finally start painting. The next step is easy. The texture on these 3D printed parts does most of the work for you. If you can lightly drag a brush back and forth across the surface, it'll practically paint itself. I'm generally not a big fan of mixing paints, as there are usually ready-made colors for just about any shade you could want. It can also make it difficult to stay consistent across a larger build where you want all the colors to match, especially when you're aiming for a more monochrome look like I am. In this case though, I want the sewer to be a bit darker than the streets above, and I don't have the exact color I need on hand. Since this is a one-off sewer section, I don't have to worry about recreating the exact same mix later. You don't have to be too consistent on this layer. Just get the paint on here and there, leaving some of the black primer showing through in places. It helps create a more natural, worn look, and adds a bit of depth to the surface. The second layer doesn't look like much of a difference on camera, but it adds subtle variation, creating a more natural look and giving the surface extra depth. I give the topper the same 2 gray layers of paint as the other ground tiles on the board. Now it's time to bring out the oil wash. I'll start with a brown wash, applying it to some of the larger flat areas to break up the surface and add some variation. I'll also work it into the corners and crevices to create a bit more depth. Since I will add transparent resin later, I'll apply some of the wash to the bottom as well. It should help sell the illusion of dirty sewer water beneath the surface. Next, I'll jump straight to the topper and apply the same brown oil wash. Since oil paints need a couple of hours to dry, I'll let this cure before applying the next oil wash. This is also a really easy way to make the stonework look more natural. The tricky part is getting it to match the rest of the tiles on the board. Whether I've succeeded or not is something we'll only find out once everything is finished and we put all the tiles together. Time for second oil wash. We'll be using this bluish gray on both the sewer sections and the tile toppers. I'll apply it from the top down and concentrating it in the areas where it feels most natural. The goal is to blend everything together, avoiding any harsh edges or obvious transitions. If needed, I simply dip the brush in some thinner and feather the oil wash out a little more. Because I'll be using semi-transparent resin at the bottom, I'm adding a bit of wash here to create some texture and depth beneath the surface. Same oil wash, just switching to a bigger brush to cover more ground. You can clearly see how the gray oil wash dries with a subtle blue tint. I really like this effect, and I use it whenever I get the chance. So next I'm applying a black oil wash to the sewers. The goal is to create a dark, murky atmosphere while still preserving the details in the shadows. Now for the final oil wash of the build. I had this sickly yellow oil paint that I wanted to try, just to see if it could capture some of the filth and grime you'd expect to find deep down in the sewers. I'll be placing candles in the wall recesses, so I decided to try a light effect. It's my first attempt at this technique, and while I'm not completely happy with it, it's all part of the learning process. Before the resin pour, I added some dirty down rust effect to all the metal details. I'm using a 2-part epoxy resin. The plan is to tint the first batch with a little color, then immediately mix a second batch that's completely clear. As I pour the clear resin over the tinted layer, the two won't mix completely, creating a murky, dirty effect, while still letting you see the details on the bottom. Well, it didn't go exactly as planned. The first tinted batch didn't have enough pigment, so I added more, then I poured more than I should have. I had to remove some of the resin to get the mix just right. I wanted both tiles to have the same overall look, so it took a bit of trial and error to get there. It turned out pretty close to what I had in mind. Even so, I know this might not be what everyone expects. In films and games, sewer water is often shown as thick, muddy brown. While I wanted something a bit different that still lets you see what's beneath the surface. So what do you think? If you were building the perfect sewer, what would your water look like? I'd love to hear your ideas and any tips or tricks you have. For the grills, I'll be painting them in 4 stages. It might sound like a lot, but it's actually a quick and easy process. First, I dry brush on a reddish-brown color to create the base. Next up is a watered-down orange paint to build up the rust effect. Don't worry about being too neat here. The randomness only makes it look more realistic. The third step is to randomly dry brush some metallic paint. Once again, keep it simple, less is more here. For the final step, I add some dirty down rust to the broken edges and corners. I imagine that's where the rust would be most severe, as the exposed metal has been left to the elements. Now it's time to seal this section by gluing down the tile topper. After that, all that's left are the finishing touches, the small details that really bring the board to life. The rats are there purely to enhance the atmosphere. I'm just making sure they're positioned so they won't get in the way during gameplay. And that's it, 2 more tiles finished. The Mordheim board is really starting to come together, and with every tile, the ruined city feels a little more alive. I hope you've enjoyed following along. If you have any ideas or suggestions, I'd love to hear them in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It really helps the channel, and lets me keep making more projects like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.